Hello and welcome. I am Scrapperlock and this is City of Heroes. We are soloing the Stalker. We're level 45. We just finished the Malta story arc, which you may not have seen that much of because I filmed several episodes. We'll talk about that a little bit. That I wasn't really happy with. We have 1045 merits, so we need about 150 to go. Which is, let's see, the last story arc gave us 58. So 3 more story arcs, and we should have it probably by level 46. We will have our reward merits. And what I'm going to try to do is do Madeline Casey at 45 because I want to do her story arc if we can. I don't know if we're going to get it, and I don't know if we get it whether we might be stuck doing level +0 or +1. If we are, we're just going to do that because although it might be easy, I really like Madeline Casey's story arc, and I like the Carnival Shadows. They're a really cool villain organization. Um, Very interesting, and they have cool like effects and really cool costumes and stuff. And I just really like them. I think if I ever ran a superhero game, I might make some carnies. I think carnies are pretty cool. I don't know if I'd do this story arc, but I definitely think, like I said, I would if I ran a Champions game, I would probably set it in Paragon City and use a lot of the thematic material of COH because I really like it. And carnies are definitely one. So you have 3 people to rescue. We want to defeat the Carnival Mistress. These guys are +2, so that's good. Don't remember where the rescuees are. So we'll just wander around and see if we can find them. Let's get the limits. And as we go, we're going to talk about some. First of all, I'm going to sort of explain why I probably haven't actually shown you guys the. I probably haven't posted the videos that I made. The last couple. I feel like I was like, most of my rants actually come out kind of naturally. I'll say, oh, we're going to talk about this, and then I end up doing what I feel, whether I'm right or wrong, is a pretty epic rant, or at least one that I don't mind listening over again. And if I don't mind then listening to it again, then maybe you guys won't mind listening to it a first time. But these last couple of rants I did, it's sort of like I went in planning to do a rant like explicitly, and it just wasn't something worth ranting about. I felt like I was forcing it, and I didn't even want to listen to it back for a couple of them. So I probably didn't post them. I don't know yet because I'm still posting the end of season 3, and this is season 4. But yeah, that would be why. So I'm not going to do any ranting. We'll talk about what's going on in the game, and we'll talk about a couple of other things that I want to sort of chat about, but I don't intend to do a lot of ranting. So we're going to talk a little bit about games. We'll talk a bit about realism in games and whether it's even desirable to have and how much it's desirable to have. Realism versus verisimilitude, I think, is an interesting thing to talk about, and I think that a lot of the good games have the right balance of that, and some of the games that are less successful don't have the right balance or any of either of them at all. So this comes from the field of wargaming again, because I've become very involved in that hobby now very quickly. I'm really enjoying it. It's really bringing me back, much as this game brings me back to 20 years ago when I was playing it with all my friends and we were having a lot of fun with it. And I was at parts of my life were better, parts were worse, but some of the parts of my life that I like remembering are kind of wrapped up in City of Heroes time period, and so it has some good nostalgia for me. We've talked about, nostalgia games that are comfort games. This is a comfort game for me. Well, there's a sense in which war games are a comfort hobby for me because I was doing that many years ago when I was a young lad, literally, not somebody who was in his 40s from the perspective of somebody in their 50s, but actually young, high school, college. And I greatly enjoyed them, and I still do. I just like thinking about unit tactics and that sort of stuff. I think it's really cool and interesting. And so I've been, kind of getting back into the hobby after many, many, many years out away from it. And I have 5 games now that I haven't played. Well, one of which I played technically a full campaign, although you're playing a single character, and I died really fast. And part of a campaign that I realized the first time that I realized I was doing it all wrong and stopped. Um, and I'm in the middle of doing some missions. Maybe you'd call it a campaign for another game. The other four, I guess 3 or 4, I haven't touched, but I eventually will. And so I've been reading a lot on that, on those things, on those types of games, and I've been, you know, reading forums often to find information. You know, you look something up and it Google directs you to a forum. And one of the things that that I've been paying a lot of attention to is Advanced Squad Leader, because that's the kind of the granddaddy of them all. That's my Grail game, right? That's my holy Grail game that I want to eventually have all of it and be able to play it. And what is it? Somebody said it's more of a lifestyle than a game. Well, it's a lifestyle I want to try out, and so this is very odd. They're all +2. There aren't any +3s. Very strange. In most missions like this, you'd have a mix. I wonder if this has to do with our level being 45 and they can't go above 47. So they're kind of, I don't know. Where's the gal? There she is. So she's only a +1 boss. So it's a level 47 mission. So I don't know why she's 46. Everybody around her is 47. It's sort of odd. All right, well, start with this puppy. That is nice, guys. They are super annoying, the illusionists, and to be able to one-shot them like that is quite nice. So anyway, I've been reading a lot of stuff on Advanced Squad Leader. Why do I bring this up? Well, somebody who's been playing it a long time, 20 years. It's a long time to be playing a game, maybe 25 years, a long time. Although certainly not when it first came out, because it's a lot older a game than that. But anyway, he's been playing ASL for a really long time, and he said, I quit. And here's why. And his reason was that he's somehow now, after all these years, and a lot of people kind of critiqued this and said, like, why are you just finding this out now? Wow, they're pounding me. Why are you just figuring this out now after all these years? You've been playing it for 20 years. Didn't you notice this before? His complaint is that it's not very realistic. It doesn't reflect how the military actually works, how battles are actually fought, and that kind of thing. It's very, shall we say, game-ish, gamey. And so he's not going to play it anymore. And so whether he should have realized this a long time ago, who cares? But the question I thought about was, how much does this matter? When you're playing a game, you're playing City of Heroes, how much does it matter to us how, quote-unquote, realistic the game of City of Heroes is? I often talk about the verisimilitude of this game and how City of Heroes actually does a really good job of making you feel like you're in a city, but there's no sense in which anyone could possibly argue that Paragon City has all the parts of it that a city has, right? A real city. I mean, like, there's lots of stuff that they don't really bother to portray in Paragon City. There isn't a post office, for instance, is there? And if there were, there certainly aren't mailmen and mailwomen going around the city delivering mail, right? They have some power lines and stuff, but there are lots of parts of the town where you don't actually see telephone poles and stuff, right? They're in some places, you know, you have traffic lights, you have your street lights, but you know, there are cars, but there's never any real traffic. You can't get run over by a car. I mean, it's not hyper realistic. It's just oh, we got to do this again. It's got enough elements to a cityscape that it feels superficially, when you're just flying or super jumping through it, feels like you're in a city. right? And it does it enough, right? It gives you just enough of that verisimilitude that it gives you the feel without all the details of a city, right? And so I don't know exactly what, I didn't read this guy's post. I don't know exactly what aspects of ASL were so unrealistic that they were bothering him. Maybe a lot of them. Maybe there was one thing in particular. I don't really know. But yeah, the question I have for you guys to think about and for me to think about is how much does it matter that the game is realistic if it's in a role-playing game or in a board game or whatever the game happens to be, right? Monopoly is not a realistic property management game. It's very gamey, but it can be a lot of fun to play. And so I'm just trying to avoid that little red square there. It's really interesting that we don't get the blue line here. So yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, and this brings us to the old topic I've mentioned in an old video a couple of years ago. This idea that somebody put out that games he talking about role playing games, but I think you can certainly also talk about and we're just looking for the hostages here. You can also talk about war games, board war games in the same, or computer war games in the same light, and that is that this idea that games that a given game can be gamist, narrativist, or simulationist, right? So a narrativist game focuses on the narrative, the story that you're building. There are narrativist war games, the American Tank Ace and British Tank Ace games. One of the things they're doing is building a narrative, right? You're building a story of what your quote unquote characters, almost like a role playing game, and you're building a story of what your character did during the war. And you could literally write a short story as you're doing it if you want to like write it up the way you could write a short story about Ironsworn when you're playing it. So it's very narrativist. But there are also gamist elements to it, a lot of die rolling and charts and that sort of thing. And there are also so narrativist is building a story. A gamist type of game, if you want to call it that, also a gamist outlook as a player. Oh, you mean game. Gamist is about the game system, right? The way the dice are rolled, the various abilities your character has, the game systems that are in place. And when you're doing something like min-maxing a character, like you go into your character and you fool around with sets and stuff and decide this stuff and figuring out exactly what to put on the character to max it out, that's gamist, right? That you're gaming the system essentially, figuring out what I put in the tray. This tray is not a simulationist or a narrativist device, it's a gamist device. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong, but a gamist thing is about beating the system or excelling within the system that was designed for the game. All right, and so depending on the game you're playing, right, you have initiative. So in D&D, old school D&D, you used to have side-based initiative, and that is going to have different consequences than if you have individual initiative and it's alternating between the sides. So one of the PCs go, and then two NPCs, and then two more PCs, and so forth. Also in Dungeons and Dragons, 5th edition, where you have individual initiative, the initiative persists from round to round. So if you go first on this round, and I'm going last on this round, as soon as I'm done going, you go again, right? And by knowing the order of what's coming, you can make game-based choices of what you're going to do because you know how long it's going to be until you go next. If you compare that to, say, Savage Worlds, which has randomized round by round initiative. Every round you redraw cards, and that actually came up in our last session, where one of the players said, "When does this effect last?" Because he was going at the end of the round, and he was going to try to lay an effect on the enemy, and he said, "How long does it last?" I said, "It lasts until the start of her next turn," and he was like, "Oh, so if she draws an ace or something, it's going to end immediately, pretty much." And I said, "Yeah, pretty much." Right? So he said, "Then I'm not going to throw it." Right? That wasn't a narrative choice. That wasn't a role-playing choice. That was a choice that was based entirely on the fact that in the game system of Savage Worlds, right, in the game system that Deadlands is played within, initiative works a certain way, and I'm going to make a decision about I'm going to hold my character's action that narratively she would want to do until the game mechanics make it more advantageous. So like the next round starts and this person went already, and then I go second, I throw it on her, and now for the rest of the round all of my allies can attack her with this effect in place because she can't go again until sometime next round. That's a gamist decision, right? Similarly with war games, there are different kinds of war games. What is it called? The I go you go, right? I'm not sure exactly which way they define this. There's sort of two basic ways to do war games. One way, we're going to get swarmed here. All right, we're going to put overload, and we're going to go ahead and pop some of this. I could try to peel these guys off, but I'm not going to bother. We'll fight everybody. It's okay. If we run out of endurance, we can suck it back out of them. One of the really nice things about this power set. There are two ways you can do war games. I don't know the official names for these, but I call it turn-based and impulse-based, named after the way different games are run. In a turn-based, like alternating turn-based combat, in a war game, what happens is you have some number of units. I don't know, you might have 20 units, 10 units, whatever it is, 5 squads. And when it's your turn, you move all of your squads. And then I move all of my squads. There may be interrupts, like if I walk across your line of fire, you might be able to interrupt me and shoot. But otherwise, all of my guys go, and then all of your guys go. I think that's the I go, you go. Impulse-based is where within each turn, I move one unit, and then you move one unit. And my move this turn, at least in the game Lock and Load, is called an impulse. And it's the first time I encountered it, so that's why I call it impulse-driven. So we go, and I have 5 units, and you have 5 units. So my first squad goes, and then your first squad goes, and then my second squad goes, and then your second squad goes. Initiative is much less important in a game like this, because I'm only going to get to move one unit before it's your turn, and you're only going to get to move one unit before it's my turn. So if you go last, quote unquote, it's just one, right? And then I go, and then like I go once, and then you go, and then I go, and then you go. And so we take turns within the turns, right? And so deciding what you do in a game like that, you're going to make different decisions if you have an impulse-based game where I can only move one unit before you get to move, and you're only going to move one unit, versus the sort of decision that you're going to make in a game where I get to move all of my guys first, and then you move all of your guys, right? I can make riskier decisions when I get to move all of my guys first. Right? Because I might be able to move a couple of guys and then shoot with a couple of guys and take out the unit that you might use to interrupt me because you don't go yet. But if it's I go, then you go, then I go, then you go within a turn, I'm only going to move one unit and then you can do something to respond. Right? And so which system you're using as a game system is going to affect the tactical decisions that you make, even though those have nothing to do with narrative or storyline. It's a good thing I was here when that happened. Um, so narrativist games are about building a story. Gamist games are about playing the system. Simulationist games are about trying to, as best you can, um, replicate some corner of reality. You're not going to be ever replicating a lot about reality because that's not possible, but you're replicating some corner of reality. And so, you might be in a war game. You might be trying to um, do a really good job of simulating the actual battle on Utah Beach on D-Day, right? And you're going to be like as close as you can to accurate, and you're going to try to make it as realistic as possible. Um, in role-playing games, simulationist games are designed to try and again replicate reality as best as possible, and so they're not going to have as many sort of artificial um, artificial aspects. I don't know how you would do initiative if you're simulationist, but side-based initiative would not be simulationist, right? So I think Champions does a much better job of simulating initiative. They don't have initiative. They have phases, right? 1 through 12 that represent like a second of real time. Now that's not simulationist really. Well, Champions is simulationist in comic books, right? A lot happens in a single panel of a comic book, which is why they do it that way. But you have phases, segments, and segment 1, anybody who goes on segment 1 gets to go, and then you go in dex order, right? And so it's simulationist in the sense that the people with the fastest speed go the most often, and the people with the highest dex go first if they are tied. Right? If we both get to go have a phase on segment 2, which we used to always shorthand by calling it phase 2, but it's not really, it's a segment 2 phase, right? But if we go on if we both have phase 2, and you have a 36 dex and I have a 29, then you go first. And that's a simulation of the fact that faster people, more agile people get to go first, right? They're going to be quicker about it, quicker on the draw, and therefore they will go first. Whereas in Savage Worlds, you can have really high agility and shooting and whatever other skills, and unless you have some sort of an edge that lets you redraw cards, it's just the luck of the draw. You might get a Jack and I get an ace and I go first, even though I have a D6 dex and you have D12 or agility and you have D12, right? And so a simulationist game is going to be much more rigid and strict about. Oh, we got some nemesis here. Is much more strict about those kinds of rules in an effort to try and make the combat and the skills and whatever as realistic as possible, right? And so back in the day, there was this claim that somebody made, I don't remember who it was, this idea that most gamers prefer simulationist or narrativist or gamist types of games. Most game groups favor one way or the other, and that what you ought to do is design your game to appeal to one of these two groups. And in fact, they made the explicit decision in Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition to make it a gamist game, and a lot of people didn't like it. But that was a decision they made because somebody was influenced on the design team by this article that was written about these types of games. And 4th edition didn't work. And what the conclusion that most people came to as a consequence of this is that although yes, these are 3 different ways to experience a game, most gamers want some of each. Right? If you're playing a role-playing game, you definitely want there to be a story, but you don't necessarily want the story to be completely divorced from anything realistic. You want some sort of a sense of simulation, right? We want City of Heroes to have a cool story. We've got story arcs here, right? But we want the story arcs to be logical and make sense and to simulate being a superhero in a comic book world. So we have a simulationist interest in the game, right? And although we have this simulationist idea and we have the narration of the story, we also have the gamist part where we're gaming the system and trying to build a more efficient character. And most gamers have a little of like a little, each one a little bit. And some people may prefer one over the other, but most gamers want all three. Maybe to varying degrees, but most gamers want all three. This is true in role-playing games, and I think it's also true in something like a war game, right? One of the things that I've been toying with and trying to figure out how I want to do it, because I'm a psycho and I like making up spreadsheets and numbers and all that stuff. The games that I have ordered on Board Game Geek, they all have. I didn't order them on Board Game Geek. The games that I've ordered have on Board Game Geek ratings, right? Scale of 1 to 10. They're rated 8.0, 8.5, 7.9, whatever. And one of the things I have in my Obsidian file, which is equivalent to a spreadsheet of games, but it's just done as Obsidian note cards, I have a property next to the rating property called My Rating, right? I'm going to rate the game because, before you buy it, the rating of other people for the game may affect whether you buy it or not, but once I've played it, what matters is what I think of the game, not what other people think of the game. I don't care what the people on Board Game Geek think of a game. If they hated it and I love it, I'm still going to play it, and vice versa, right? If they loved it and I hate it, I'm probably not going to play it much. And so I was thinking about, well, what would I use to come up with a rating? And I thought about it from this kind of a perspective, right? One question is, how much fun is the game? Just fun, right? But then there's a question of, okay, I'm trying to figure out what I would call it, military verisimilitude. I'm no expert on military things, but how tactically reasonable does it seem? Are we really abstracting things to the point that it's just game mechanics that don't really have anything to do with how things work in a war? Or do we have something that's extremely realistic, but maybe it doesn't make for a playable game? So, for example, American Tank Ace, which is the one game I've played to any significant degree so far, it leans toward narrativist and simulationist. And I think that it does a really good job of simulating what it was like to be a tank commander in World War II, but it's so enslaved to trying to be exactly what it was really like that some of the way it plays is not very playable, right? There's no mechanism for dealing with the fact that you could get into your very first battle and by pure lucky rolls, before you can even do anything, be destroyed and lose your tank commander and have to start over. And the amount of setup it takes to start a campaign is enough that if you die in the first mission or two, it's super annoying to have to just start all over again, right? You got to make up a new tank commander, a new crew, send them through training for one mission, and it can be entirely luck. And the author of the game has addressed this and said, well, that's just how it was in World War II. Sometimes guys got in a tank, drove across a hedgerow in Normandy 5 miles from the beach and got blown up by an anti-tank gun. Yeah, that might be realistic, but as a player of a game, it's not a lot of fun to do that. And if you get into a battle and you make bad decisions, and as a consequence of those poor decisions you die, that's one thing. But again, using this as an example, not that I want to talk war games to death, but using this as an example, in the first 2 months of the campaign, which is June and July 1944, because it's right after D-Day, you're in a part of France that has a lot of what's called bocage, which is sort of like wooded farmland with hedgerows and stuff, I guess. And bocage must provide enough cover for the Germans that, in reality, the American squads and platoons and companies that were pushing forward got jumped. And all of a sudden, from very close range, they're getting shot at, right? And so there's like a 4, I think 4 out of 6, right? D6 1 to 4. If you start in Bocage, and if you start in Bocage, you're on the battle map. You must start in close range. If you start in woods, you must start in medium range. Everything else starts at long range. And so when you're at long range, you can decide whether to move closer or not. The enemies can't close in on you. They can try to flank you, but they can't force you closer, except in a defense mission where you're defending. But in June and July of 1944, it was very unlikely that you're going to be defending. So you're usually attacking, and you're usually almost always going to be attacking in Bocage, right? And then you roll to see what units are there. So by pure luck, you could roll that you're attacking. By pure luck, 2 bosses here. Okay, well, we're going to hit overload then. By pure luck, you could roll that you are attacking and that you are in Bocage and you start at close range. And by pure luck, you could roll up that you have several infantry units against you. And then then you roll to see if you're part of a larger action. You're just one tank, and so what you have to do is roll each round to see do they notice you, right? And so you could by luck roll a 1, and one of them notices you. And if you're in longer range, medium and long range, the infantry can't really do much to you. They could possibly wound you. If your head is sticking out of the tank's turret, and there's a mechanic for figuring that out, but they can't. They have a very low chance to do anything to a tank at medium or long range. But at close range, there's a 50-50 chance they're going to decide to attack you with essentially a bazooka, a Panzerschreck or Panzerfaust. And if they do attack you with a Panzerfaust, there's a believe a 4 in 6 chance they just blow you up and your tank is destroyed and you die. Right? So all of this is done. If you're attacking, they go first. You can't do anything. So you put everything on the board. You make these rolls, and it's not super likely if you add up all the possibilities, but there's like a 10% chance in an attack mission in the first month of the game that you're going to just watch a bunch of die rolls lead to your character dying, and you can't do anything about it. There is no decision you could make. There is no abort and go desolid, right? There's no abort to a defensive position. There's no flee. You can do that on your round when you go, but in an attack mission, they go first. Now, I'm not trying to critique the game itself. What I'm saying is that that's very simulationist. It follows what actually happened. That 10% of the time or so, probably statistically, a Sherman tank, the Germans just jumped up out of the hedgerow, shot an equivalent of a bazooka at you, hit you, and knocked your tank out, and you died. Because the tank was basically a death trap at that point. It's very realistic. It's very simulationist. Not a lot of fun if that happens to you, right? Because you can't do anything about it. Now, if you could make some sort of a roll to avoid it or to flee or whatever, and or make some sort of a tactical decision. Get out of here. We're overloading. Make a tactical decision that could possibly prevent you from being one-shotted like that, then it might be more interesting, even if it's more unrealistic. Right? But if it's like you get to choose whether you're moving cautiously through the bocage and maybe get medium range, but there are some penalties, or you move aggressively through the bocage and you start at close range, but you get bonuses. If you survive that initial attack, or if they don't target you, you got +1 against everybody, right? Whereas in the medium range, you didn't survive the initial attack, but you've got -1, right? But my guess is the author would say, well, why would you have these +1s and -1s? That's very gamey. It's not simulationist, yes, but it might make the game more fun as a player. You see? And so my point about this is that what the person who was I hate these guys. They just randomly go D-solid. The person who was complaining about Advanced Squad Leader was saying it's not a simulationist enough game. And I guess after playing it for a long time, he realized just how not simulationist it was. And so the thing is, guys, that no game can be fully simulationist or it would be real life. Right? There's always going to have to be some game mechanics. And the question is just how much you have. And how much is enough. And then the question becomes, what's the goal? Are you trying to simulate World War II, or are you trying to have a fun tactical experience? Or like, you think about, say, East Texas University. And I probably ought to not do this. So, in the show that I watched, the Wildcard show, the players in the first season, the audience unlocked by donations, the players making up a full weekly schedule for each of their characters and knowing when all their classes met and who their teachers were and stuff. And so they did that in the first season, and then they never did it again. And I think what they did was they said the University of Texas or the Texas A&M website, and they found the classes and they just figured it out, right? And they used the schedule on that website. And so when they were asked in their final campfire talkback where they talked to the audience and answered questions, how come you guys didn't keep that up? And they said it was just too much overhead, right? It was just too much to worry about. Like, it wasn't necessary to know the schedules like that most of the time for most of the scenarios that they were running. It just didn't really matter. Now, what I did, because I liked it when they did that, I actually came up with a system for my players to roll on tables and fill out a schedule sheet. And I even had it be like, if you're both taking the same class, then then you like draw from a deck of cards, and if you get matching suits, you're in the same class, right? And I looked at these rules a while ago and thought, this is too much, right? Because, like, do we really need that? That's being very simulationist, but I don't know that it's going to make the game any more fun to play, right? I think now, looking back on it, what it would probably be better to do would be to say, here's your schedule. As we play this semester, we'll decide when your classes are, and you can... Who am I missing here? As we play through this semester, we can decide what when your classes meet, and who your teachers are and stuff. And if you guys, you're going to pick your what your classes are each semester. That to me is reasonable. You know which majors and non-majors classes you're taking, but the schedule itself, like the classes on Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 10 o'clock, that doesn't need to be made up unless we need to know where you are at Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 10. Right? And we could just make that up as we go and then just write it down so that we don't forget it, and so that we're not saying that your English class is on Mondays and Wednesdays this session, and then next session, same semester, your English class is on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Right? We don't want to do that because that's sort of continuity breaking. But what we don't need to do is to make up every single class for every single character for the whole semester, when half the time it may not even matter because they might be doing stuff on weekends or in the evenings and that sort of thing. I don't know what I have missed in here. Why does this always happen to me? I can never find the last guy. And I don't feel like I was being careless in here. Let's show the villain names and see if that helps. I mean, I went everywhere, didn't I? Did I not go to the end of this room where the Nemesis boss was, and maybe there was somebody in the little alcove behind him? Maybe. Nope. So yeah, I mean, I think that having some degree of verisimilitude is very important. So you want some simulation in the game, but you also want a game system that's fun and playable. And then, of course, especially in a role playing game, you want a story, you want a narrative, right? The whole idea of a role playing game is, as they say with Champions, cooperative storytelling. So the narrative is really important. Now, some people would say the narrative is the most important thing, and um, that if you that you should sacrifice simulation like verisimilitude, reality, rule of cool. I'm gonna go outside and come back in. Maybe it'll spawn whoever this is. The rule of cool is saying that the narrative comes above simulation because lots of wildly unrealistic things happen when you do the rule of cool, and also it comes above gaming. Now, see, it did show me him. It comes above the gaming because oftentimes the rule of cool breaks the rules of the game. Right? You're not following the rules because it would be cool to let this narrative thing happen instead, right? And again, it's not necessarily anything wrong objectively with it. The question is, do you want to be more narrative driven, more reality driven, simulation driven, or more game system driven? And I think it's good to have a balance of them all. So that'd be my preference. Still don't have a story arc from this girl. Callisti Wharf. How are we doing on time? We can do one more. Watch this be a really long mission now, but that's okay. I believe I have... Do I have Callisti? I do. Okay. I gotta go into Eden and grab those badges. I just haven't gotten around to it. So, guys, put your comments down below. What are your thoughts on this? Do you have a preference one way or the other? I definitely want it to be a cool, fun to play game system. The other game I've been playing now, which I would argue is way more fun than American Tank Ace. Not that Tank Ace is a good game. I'm going to go back to it. It's not bad, but I think it's way more fun. And that is, what level are these guys? 50. Okay. Oh no. I don't want everybody's name on here. No. Take that off. There we go. Yeah, we don't want that. I've been playing Conflict of Heroes. The first mission I played in that game, as I was doing it, I immediately said, this is very gamey. It wasn't negative. I have had an absolute blast soloing 2- and 4-man missions in Conflict of Heroes, even though they're not meant to be done by yourself. There is a solo supplement, I don't have it. I have been having fun. The game, as a game, is a blast. The rules are fairly straightforward and simple. They're not ultra complicated. They do a really good thing where they teach you certain rules and then they give you a scenario that allows you to play with those rules. So they just do basic like infantry fighting. You have a scenario about it. Then they teach you how to do group movement where you move several units at the same time if they're adjacent to each other, and then they start you in a position where both the Russians and the Germans have guys that they can do group movement with, and they say go ahead and try it if you want. And you do group movement. Then they teach you how to have hidden units, and you do that. And then they teach you how to have terrain modifiers and smoke, and you do that. And so they have these missions that build in complexity. You learn the game, and each of the game systems is fun. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of luck to it, and every time you succeed at something that's hard, it's like it feels great. There is luck. You have to roll a certain number, but they make the number low enough, or the target number viable enough that there's a pretty good chance. You got like a 50-50 chance, right? So it's not automatic, but it's not like you're constantly missing, failing. It's one of the things I don't like about American Tank Ace is that both sides miss a lot. And so, it's, again, designed to be realistic, that a lot of ordnance just doesn't land. But again, just having like 5 rounds go by where neither side hits might be super realistic, but it's not wildly interesting. Whereas in Conflict of Heroes, it is hard to hit the target or to succeed at your rolls, but it's not so difficult that everybody's missing all the time. And so I've been having a blast. But as I noted when I first started playing it, and I still think it's true after having learned more of the rules, it is a very gamey system. It abstracts what's happening on the battlefield a lot. That makes it easy to learn, right? For example, in a lot of tactical games like Lock and Load, Advanced Squad Leader, etc., you have squad units, vehicle units, and leader units. And squads can do much better things. They're much better at doing things. And they can do some things that they couldn't otherwise do if there's a leader stacked with them. And so having stacks with a leader in them is like a really important thing in those other games. Conflict of Heroes doesn't have leader units. There just aren't any. It assumes that there are leaders in each squad, and instead it gives you this thing called command action points, or CAP. And the command action points are abstractions. You can spend a few of them each round, and your spending of the command points is kind of represents the idea that you assigned a leader to this squad, and the leader helped them, hit their target or hide or whatever they're doing, right? So you don't have different leaders with different stats that are better at different things that you assign to units. Instead, you just use CAP, right? And if your unit does better than it would have done by the die rolls, it's because there's quote unquote a leader in there issuing orders. But we're not going to bother to simulate that, right? So that means it's less realistic, because in reality there are heroes and leaders in a military action. In Lock and Load, when a unit gets wounded, if you roll a certain die roll, and I can't remember what it is, double sixes or something, or I can't remember, that unit generates a hero. So this is a guy who came out of the battle instead of being wounded. He's like the hero now, right? He saved the rest of the guys or whatever. And now that unit gets put onto the board as a hero and acts kind of like a leader and can do the same things that a leader would do. So you can have a squad that's leaderless, do damage to them, a hero is generated, and now they have a leader, right? And that is very simulationist in the sense that in a battle, you could have a squad of troops pinned down, and one of them says, "Follow me, boys." And now, even though he's a private like the rest of them, they're all going to listen to him because he just saved everybody's life, and he inspires them, right? That sort of thing. And so that kind of thing can't be simulated in a game that doesn't have leader units. So it's less simulationist. However, leaders make things much more complicated, because now you have to have rules for what the leaders get wounded, what happens when they do, what happens when you don't have a leader in the hex, and none of that is necessary in Conflict of Heroes. It makes it easier. So it's more of a gamey type of a game. Now, I really enjoy it. I really love it. But after playing a few missions, as much as I love it, and I'm going to keep playing it, there's nothing wrong with it, I definitely said to myself, okay, this is a really cool game, but I want a game with more crunch, more simulation, right? Again, it doesn't mean that it's bad to have a game that doesn't have simulation, but as I search through the war games to find, my one, the one that I'm going to want to play a lot, right? Which my guess is going to probably end up being Squad Leader, but I don't know. One of the things I'm going to be looking for is that balance of gaminess versus simulation. And as much fun as Conflict of Heroes is, and it is undeniably fun, and I know I will keep coming back to it, And I'm probably going to buy the other games. I have Awakening the Bear. I'll probably buy Storms of Steel. I'll probably buy the Guadalcanal one if I can find the Poland one. I probably will eventually have them all because it's a lot of fun. But I I also am going to want a game that has more simulation to it. I just got Panzer, which is kind of like Squad Leader but for tanks, and it's Panzer North Africa. It's the newest version. That has much more complicated rules to it. I could just see it already, just flipping through. I might like that one better, even if it's not as gamey, because it's more simulationist, right? It all depends on. It's also going to depend on what mood I'm in, right? That if I like some days I'm going to be like, you know what? I just want to kind of turn my brain off and have a gamey night, right? Then it'll be Conflict of Heroes. Other days I might be like, you know what? I want to have a really good simulationist, complicated rules crunch night. Then it might be Panzer, it might be Advanced Squad Leader, it might be Lock and Load. And so I think we all get into different moods of whether we want more of a narration. I mean, if I want a narrativist game, I'll probably play something like American Tank Ace, right? And it's very cool, and you can build a campaign, and you can tell a story about your characters and the name of your tank and the nicknames of all of your squad members and stuff like that. Super fun. And it's almost like a role-playing game. That's very kind of narrativist, sort of narrativist simulationist, but not as much of a gamist type of game, right? The gamey parts are reduced. If I feel like having a really gamey night, I'll open up Conflict of Heroes, and if I feel like I want a real simulationist night, it might be Squad Leader. Notwithstanding this guy's complaint that it isn't "quote unquote" realistic enough, there is no question that Squad Leader is more realistic than the gaminess of Conflict of Heroes. And so, yeah, it all depends on what you want. Same thing with a role-playing game, right? You can have a more simulationist game like what I would argue Champions, right, which is designed to be very simulationist of comic books. And the reason I say that Champions is simulationist is I used to say when I was younger, you could make up anything in the world in Champions terms using the points. It might be very expensive. You can make up a Sherman tank, and you can make it pretty dang realistic. In terms of if you know the damage a bazooka does and how much damage a Sherman tank takes, you could set it up so that the bazooka is doing a reasonable amount of AP damage or whatever to the Sherman tank. They have armor piercing, they have hardened defenses, they have different armor thicknesses. You can really get into the weeds on it. You can, every single object in this office, when I was running Champions, I can't do it now, I could tell you the defense and body of every one of these things just by looking at them. And it will be realistic in the sense that the chairs and the couches and the tables and the bulletin board and the doors will all have a resistance to damage, and damage will be dealt to them in a way that will make sense compared to each other, right? It might not be able to take the quote unquote real amount of damage, like it's possible with a handgun to shoot a hole in a brick wall, which you can't actually do if you get the right rolls. That's not going to actually happen unless you have the right kind of bullets, but this is just with regular bullets. If you get the max rolls, you could do it, but on average rolls you can't, right? So if you assume average rolls and you assume average performance of everything, it's pretty good objectively, but also relatively, right? That is to say, yeah, you might be able to shoot a hole through a brick wall with a pistol, but a brick wall's performance in combat, its resistance, the damage it does if you slam into it, etc., is correctly tuned relative to the damage a sheetrock wall or a steel wall would take or do, right? They did a really good job with that in Champions, and I used to say I could do anything in Champions. I could, using powers, talents, etc., all the various rules, I can literally make anything in Champions. You can't do that in D&D. They just don't have the game spec'd out that way. It's not necessary in D&D. So, how much damage a chair versus a couch versus a door takes, most of that's not statted out in most games, right? The reason it's statted out in Champions is because in superhero fights, there's a lot of like throwing things around and that sort of stuff. Lady of Pain. All right, we're just going to do this with her, I think. Should be all right. So I would argue Champions is more simulationist than a game like D&D. It's less abstracted. Here's a great way to know that it's less abstracted. Dungeons & Dragons has 8 attributes, characteristics like strength, dexterity, charisma. Why is this guy not attacking me? That's weird. Champions has 14, right? They've divvied up hit points into stun and body. They have divvied up charisma into presence and comeliness, right? And so, I didn't mean to hit that. And so, yes, if they have way more skills and a skill similarity table and all this stuff, D&D only has a handful of skills, right? And there were skills in D&D where one skill covers like 8 things, 8 different skills from Champions, and 2 or 3 different skills from Savage Worlds, right? So the more skills, the more stats you have, the more simulationist the game is, right? Whereas if you just have a few skills, the more generalized and abstract it is, it's not as simulationist, it's more gamist, right? Now again, that doesn't make them better or worse, right? Why am I having so much trouble seeing where oh, there it is. There's my character. I was looking for it up here. I don't have any sense of how big this zone is because I don't come in here that often. So yeah, I mean, sometimes it's more fun to have a simulationist game, sometimes a gamist game, sometimes a narrativist game, right? So Ironsworn is a narrativist game. It doesn't simulate things, and it doesn't really have a lot of game systems. It's just there to help you tell a story, right? And sometimes that's what I'm in the mood for. There's nothing necessarily wrong with any of these, but, as a player, you kind of need to know which one you're doing and which one you prefer, or which one you're in the mood for tonight, right? So it's a good idea to kind of pay attention to this and decide what you're in the mood for. I think what this guy was complaining is that he feels like Advanced Squad Leader may be a super complicated game, but it's more of a game than a simulation. I would argue, from what I know of it, it's probably a lot more simulationist than most of the other games that you could play at the tactical level. But maybe he would rather have things more abstracted so that he can imagine the simulation rather than actually trying to play it out. And that's valid, right? Depends on what you like. I think we're going to stop here, guys. I hope you have enjoyed, and hopefully this is a better recording of, not rant, but, content than the last couple of attempts I've made, which probably haven't been posted. I hope you guys have enjoyed, and until next time, I am Scrapperlock, and this is City of Heroes Soloing the Stalker.